It's always a delight knowing you're there. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of the program, where we will be looking at meat processing. There's no gainsaying that meat is a part of staples in most countries of the world, Nigeria no exception. And it's because of the importance we attach to meat and how it is processed for human consumption that we're taking out time to talk to a veterinarian concerning this all too important topic. My guest this day is Dr. Bala Muhammad, who happens to be the CEO and the CMD of Blue Blood Veterinary Limited. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you for having me.
You know, when it comes to he's a vet doctor, what normally comes to mind is he treats animals.
Correct.
And all we think about is little animals, the
Correct.
dog, the cat, and what have you.
Correct.
But tell me, as a veterinarian, it's your profession. Who truly is a vet doctor?
A vet is someone that is responsible for the total welfare of an animal.
All right.
But also, far more than that, he is also interested in the public health, the well-being of man, in a way that all he consumes as food, where he stay in as his environment, but also what he does with some of the animals that he treats is of concern to a veterinarian.
All right.
And that is who the vet is. I mean, when you look at it in the totality, the treatment aspect is less than 10% of what is expected. But when you talk about public health is even more than 50%. Also, take it that the vet is also a human being. He is one of the species that he will also want to see that what he sees in other animals that are by far more in number than the human species does not cross over there. That is why the work is more on the side of preventing certain disease infection from what we eat, from where we stay, either with the animals, coexisting with the animals, to man. It's the statutory responsibility of the vet to making sure that those diseases never cross the animal species to man species.
Coming back to our main topic of the day, when we look at, meat processing, share your thoughts with us. What does it really take, or what's the itinerary? What's the follow through when it comes to looking at an animal that probably gets slaughtered and eventually ends up on the table? What do we as consumers need to know?
Thank you. So meat processing is, again, one of the major areas where the activities of a veterinarian is needed. And it is divided largely into three aspects. You have, and you will always see that in a slaughterhouse facility, or what we call abattoir, where you have the larynge, which is the holding pen where the animals are rested. Mostly here, you have the animals being transported from a far distance farms to the abattoir. It's important that these animals are rested before slaughter. We expect that the animals spend not less than 72 hours.
Why does an animal that is going to the slaughter need to rest?
Because stress affects the quality of the meat we consume. In the slaughter hall, you now do the slaughter, observing all animal welfare procedures. There is a standard operating procedure to observe animal welfare. It must be followed through.
Across the nation, do you think that is truly being done?
Far from it.
All right, because I would think maybe in urban areas, but what happens in our villages?
Far from it, even in the urban cities, you just have the structures, and then they just go in there on the floor, they get slaughtered, and then before you say jack, they disappear. So now the slaughter hall offers us three opportunity there. The animal is slaughtered in a humane way, and all over the world there is what we call halal. Halal mode of or SOP need to be, because observed, and this is in tandem with what we consider as wholesome meat at the end of the day. And slaughter has to be the one that allow the entire blood be empty before is being moved from that same place to where they do the skinning. And there again, there is what we call post-mortem examination, meaning you have the opportunity to see every organ, from the heart to the lungs to the liver to the intestine, the rumen is being cut, and then you see everything. If the infectious materials found is in a specific organ, for instance, for most TB, you will see it, closed up in the lungs. So it is expected that the entire lung is going to be condemned, not the entire, will not be passed for human consumption. So it will be condemned and destroyed. Now here it is important to note that in Nigeria we also have those who eat their meat raw.
Sir, before we went on break, you were trying to make a point where some Nigerians actually eat meat raw.
Right. I need to emphasize here that disease-causing germs are very tricky, and there are those ones that will just cause infection in man because it is not been fully processed. Remember that we're talking about processing. So at that point, when it is in the slaughter hall, it is not fit for consumption. In other words, it must get out of that place, that any readily or live disease-causing organism will have to be killed by two that we can't see with our eyes. Is usually being destroyed either by freezing or by
fire,
by cooking. And this is important in meat processing. I need to emphasize this, that there are some disease-causing germs that come to life when they are being cooked. So the assumption in our country that when you cook it and you cook it very well, that it is fine, is not right. You need to, for some disease-causing organism, you need to freeze them. Once you freeze them, that is the only thing that destroys them. In other words, two extreme temperatures of freezing and cooking is important in sanitizing the meat we consume. Now, the last part of meat processing is now the curing and the aging department, and then to bringing it down to the language we understand is that in this department, in our climb, is where you find markets. Ideally, this last department is where you now have meat ready to be prepared, ready that you can buy from that point.
Doctor, finally, red meat, white meat. Your thoughts?
So, when you talk about food security, and you need to actually put these things in the proper perspective. Red meat and white meat is a thing of the quality of the meat we have for consumption.
So none is actually injurious to health?
None is injurious to health, but it also depends on the age. It is expected nutritionally. The quality of white meat is totally different from the quality of the red meat.
Okay.
The red meat tend to have more of those things that we battle with when it comes to age.
Okay.
You have a lot of fats that isn't too good for age. I mean, for our vessels and what have you,
cholesterol
and will need special curing, special treatment to be passed for consumption for all ages.
Okay.
Unlike the white meat that may also be lacking in certain things.
Finally, give me an example of red meat and white meat.
So red meat, basically, those meats that you found in our ruminants.
That's the cows,
in our pork.
Okay, pork.
When you talk about white meat, you are likely going to be talking much about birds.
Okay, chicken,
all right, guinea fowl. But even among the poultry, the avians, there are certain species that have been kept.
Okay.
Depending on the husbandry technology. If you have a free range, you are not likely going to get a lot of those fats.
That's right.
On them. But we've also have and they are very expensive. They are also not common. For instance, rabbit. Those are examples of
white meat.
Okay. For people to consume. But it's also been argued that even for fish, you will also find those ones that are fatty and may not, even though they look very white, they may not pass for white meat.
All right. Well, Doc, I think at this point we'll need to call it a day, and I want to thank you so much for your time, for your expertise in sharing your thoughts with us.